Picture this. You just witnessed a domestic violence incident and decide to step in to help. You're trying to do the right thing, to protect someone who can't protect themselves. But in that split second of heroism, your life is cut tragically short by a gunman who then vanishes into the night and stays hidden for nearly 2 decades. This is the story of Alfonso Vera, a 38-year-old Good Samaritan whose attempt to stop a brutal assault cost him his life in Riverside, California. It's also the story of one of the longest manhunts in the city's history, spanning 19 years, 2 countries, and countless dead ends before finally reaching its dramatic conclusion in 2024. Today, we're diving deep into a case that proves that sometimes justice moves slowly, but it moves nonetheless. This is the story of how a cold case team's determination and modern investigative techniques finally brought a killer home to face justice after nearly 2 decades on the run. Before we dive into Alfonso's story, I want to take just a moment to ask for your support. Cases like this one need to be told, not just for the compelling story, but to honor the memory of victims like Alfonso Vera and to show that justice, even when delayed, can still be served. If you believe these stories matter, if you think Alfonso's heroism deserves to be remembered, please hit that like button right now. And if you want to join our community in sharing these important stories of justice and remembrance, please subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing these cases to light and ensuring that victims are never forgotten. Now, let's honor Alfonso's memory by telling his story the way it deserves to be told. Background context. To understand this case, we need to travel back to June 2005, when Riverside, California was experiencing a period of growth and change. The city, located about 60 miles east of downtown Los Angeles, was home to approximately 285,000 people at the time. Like many California cities in the mid-2000s, Riverside was dealing with its share of urban challenges, including domestic violence incidents that too often escalated into something far more serious. Alfonso Vera was a 38-year-old man living in Riverside who, by all accounts, was known for his willingness to help others. Friends and family would later describe him as someone who couldn't turn away when he saw someone in trouble, a trait that, tragically, would cost him his life. The incident that would change everything took place in the 4700 block of Doane Avenue, a residential neighborhood in Riverside. This wasn't a high-crime area, but rather a typical working-class neighborhood where families went about their daily lives, largely unaware that they were about to witness something that would haunt the community for years to come. Luis Contreras, then 32 years old, was the man at the center of what started as a domestic dispute. According to police reports and witness statements, Contreras was involved in a heated argument with his girlfriend that had escalated to physical violence. What should have remained a private matter was about to become very public and very deadly. Timeline of events. The events of June 14, 2005, unfolded with the kind of rapid escalation that makes domestic violence calls some of the most dangerous for both civilians and law enforcement. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening when neighbors in the 4700 block of Doane Avenue began hearing raised voices and sounds of a struggle coming from a nearby residence. According to witness accounts pieced together by investigators, Luis Contreras and his girlfriend were engaged in a violent domestic dispute. The argument had moved beyond words into physical violence, with Contreras allegedly beating his girlfriend. The sounds of the altercation were loud enough to attract the attention of several neighbors, including Alfonso Vera. Vera, who was known in the neighborhood as someone who looked out for others, made the fateful decision to intervene. When he saw what was happening to the woman, he couldn't stand by and do nothing. This wasn't unusual behavior for Vera. Friends would later tell investigators that he was the type of person who would step in when he saw someone being hurt. As Vera attempted to protect the woman and stop the assault, Luis Contreras turned his rage toward this unexpected intervention. What happened next would traumatize witnesses and launch one of Riverside's longest-running manhunts. According to police reports, Contreras produced a firearm and shot Alfonso Vera multiple times. The Good Samaritan, who had simply tried to help someone in distress, was left dying on the scene while his killer prepared to flee. Witnesses reported seeing 2 vehicles leaving the area immediately after the shooting. The sound of gunshots had drawn more attention from neighbors, and several people called 911 almost immediately. When Riverside police officers arrived at the scene, they found Alfonso Vera inside the residence suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. Despite the rapid response of emergency medical personnel, Vera was pronounced dead at the scene. The initial investigation moved quickly. Detectives began interviewing witnesses and collecting evidence while the scene was still fresh. Within hours, they had identified Luis Contreras as the primary suspect in the shooting. The domestic violence incident that preceded the murder provided clear context for what had occurred, and multiple witnesses had seen the suspect flee the scene. However, speed would prove to be Contreras' ally. By the time investigators had pieced together what had happened and identified him as the shooter, he was already gone. Detectives quickly determined that Contreras had fled to Mexico, taking advantage of his proximity to the border and likely connections south of the U.S. boundary. In July 2005, just 1 month after the murder, the Riverside Police Department obtained an arrest warrant for Luis Contreras on charges related to Alfonso Vera's death. But obtaining a warrant and actually arresting the suspect would prove to be two very different challenges. Despite having a warrant in hand, investigators were unable to locate Contreras, who had seemingly vanished into Mexico's vast landscape. Investigation details. The initial investigation into Alfonso Vera's murder was both thorough and frustrating for the Riverside Police Department. Detectives had a clear sequence of events, multiple witnesses, and they knew exactly who they were looking for. But their suspect had managed to slip across an international border before they could apprehend him. The investigative team worked methodically through the evidence. They interviewed everyone who had witnessed the domestic violence incident and subsequent shooting. They processed the crime scene for physical evidence and began building a comprehensive case file that would eventually be used to prosecute Contreras when he was found. 2 of the 3 suspects connected to the incident were arrested relatively quickly, but Contreras, the alleged shooter, remained elusive. Investigators followed every lead they could develop, working with federal authorities and international law enforcement partners in an attempt to track down their fugitive. The case presented unique challenges that went far beyond typical homicide investigations. International fugitive cases require coordination between multiple law enforcement agencies, complex legal procedures for extradition, and often depend on cooperation from foreign governments. Mexico's vast territory and complex jurisdictional issues made the search even more difficult. As months turned to years, the case began to follow the familiar pattern of many international fugitive investigations. Active leads dried up, and the case gradually moved from active investigation to cold case status. However, the warrant remained active, and Alfonso Vera's case file remained in the system, waiting for new information or technological advances that might provide fresh leads. For nearly 2 decades, Luis Contreras lived in Mexico while Alfonso Vera's family and friends waited for justice. The case had become one of Riverside's most frustrating cold cases. They knew who the killer was and where he had likely fled, but they couldn't reach him. The breakthrough came in June 2024, when the Riverside Police Department's Homicide Cold Case Unit made the decision to reopen the investigation with a specific focus on locating and arresting Luis Contreras. This wasn't just a case review, it was an active, renewed manhunt using modern technology and investigative techniques that hadn't been available in 2005. The cold case team partnered with the Metro team, which participates in the U.S. Marshals Pacific Southwest Regional Fugitive Task Force. This collaboration brought federal resources and expertise to bear on the nearly 20-year-old case. The task force has specialized experience in tracking down international fugitives and the legal framework needed to bring them back to the United States. Using updated investigative techniques, advanced database searches, and international law enforcement cooperation, the task force began systematically tracking leads on Contreras' whereabouts. Unlike the limited resources available in 2005, the 2024 investigation could take advantage of improved communication systems, better international cooperation protocols, and enhanced surveillance capabilities. The breakthrough came faster than anyone expected. Within weeks of reopening the active investigation, the task force had located Luis Contreras in Mexicali, Mexico, just across the border from California. On July 8, 2024, Mexican authorities from the Fuerza Estatal de Seguridad Ciudadana, FESC, intelligence unit apprehended the 50-year-old fugitive in coordination with U.S. authorities. Resolution: current status. The arrest of Luis Contreras after 19 years on the run marked a dramatic conclusion to one of Riverside Police Department's longest-running investigations. The coordination between American and Mexican law enforcement agencies had finally paid off, bringing closure to a case that had frustrated investigators for nearly 2 decades. Following his arrest in Mexicali, Contreras was processed through the complex legal procedures required for international extradition. These cases involve coordination between federal agencies, international courts, and diplomatic channels to ensure that proper legal protocols are followed when transferring suspects across international borders. Once the extradition was completed, Luis Contreras was transported back to Riverside County and booked into the Cois M. Bird Detention Center near Murrieta. At age 50, he was finally facing the charges that had been waiting for him since 2005. The arrest warrant that had been issued 19 years earlier was finally being served. Contreras has been charged with second-degree murder in connection with Alfonso Vera's death. The case that investigators had carefully built in 2005 remained solid, with witness testimony, physical evidence, and a clear timeline of events, all preserved in the case file. Despite the passage of nearly 2 decades, the evidence was sufficient to move forward with prosecution. As of late 2024, Luis Contreras is awaiting trial in the Riverside County court system. The wheels of justice, which had been stalled for 19 years, are finally turning again. For Alfonso Vera's family and friends, the arrest represents the first real movement toward justice they had seen since 2005. The successful resolution of this case has been celebrated by the Riverside Police Department as an example of how persistence and modern investigative techniques can breathe new life into even the oldest cold cases. It also demonstrates the value of maintaining active warrants and never officially closing cases where suspects remain at large. Reflection impact. The Alfonso Vera murder case and the eventual arrest of Luis Contreras offers several important lessons about justice, persistence, and the evolving nature of law enforcement. First, it demonstrates that the passage of time doesn't diminish the commitment to justice. Alfonso Vera's case remained a priority for the Riverside Police Department even after nearly 2 decades, showing that some crimes are never forgotten by the law enforcement community. The case also highlights the importance of good Samaritans like Alfonso Vera, whose willingness to help someone in distress cost him his life, but whose memory inspired investigators to never give up on finding his killer. Vera's decision to intervene in a domestic violence situation reflects the best of human nature, even though it led to tragic consequences. Finally, this case shows how advances in technology and international cooperation can breathe new life into cold cases. The investigative techniques and coordination capabilities available in 2024 made possible what couldn't be accomplished in 2005. Proving that persistence and technological progress can eventually overcome even the most challenging obstacles to justice. Alfonso Vera's story reminds us that heroes come in many forms, and that sometimes the price of doing the right thing is unimaginably high. But it also shows us that justice, while sometimes delayed, can still be served. Alfonso Vera's story is one that deserves to be remembered and shared. He paid the ultimate price for trying to help someone in need, and his family waited 19 long years to see his killer brought to justice. By watching this video, by engaging with this content, you're helping to ensure that Alfonso's sacrifice isn't forgotten. If this story moved you, if you believe that heroes like Alfonso deserve to have their stories told, please show your support by hitting that like button. And if you want to be part of a community that honors victims and celebrates when justice is finally served, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Your support means everything to us and helps us continue sharing these important stories. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to Alfonso's story. And thank you for helping us keep his memory alive.